Hi guys, in today's video we'll be building our very first application with a real Windows style user interface. We'll be looking at a type of project called WinForms and how you can use WinForms applications to create very sort of native looking Windows applications. So let's jump into Visual Studio and take a look. So the first thing we need to do is create a new project. And today we're actually going to use a different project template. So whereas before we'd always use the console application, today we're going to use a Windows form app in .NET framework and obviously the C# language. So we'll click that one and click next. And we'll call this one WinForms. So Windows Forms, people always call that WinForms online. So if you're looking for help with anything in Windows Forms, you can search for WinForms. That's usually what people refer to it as. So we'll click create. And what you see is when this project type opens, it's very different to the console app that we previously were using. So if you look in the Solution Explorer here, you'll see actually we do still have program.cs, but all it's doing is essentially initializing form 1, which was this one, and it's doing a few other application method calls, something to do with styles, something to do with rendering text. You don't really need to worry about these too much. We'll probably look at the visual styles one later. But then finally it says application.run, and then it passes in, instantiates a new form1 object, because that's what this is. This is a class definition for a form, and it just runs that on the application. So if we just go ahead and run this program, there you go, we have a window. We can double click the title bar and it maximizes. We can double click it to minimize it. We can minimize it to the taskbar, and we can close it. And so those things all come for free with as a standard essentially in a WinForms application. So there's a few things that you've probably noticed different about this screen. We now have this toolbox on the left, and in there we've got things like common controls. And if you look inside there, we've got buttons, we've got tooltips, text boxes, rich text box, we've got list views, all different types of user interface that we can drag onto our program window here. We can resize, we can move it into the corners. You'll see these little lines that appear, it's snapping into that corner there and allowing us to have sort of uniform margins. If we pulled another one out, you'll see this also snaps against other things in our UI. So it makes it really easy to line up things evenly and have like good margins and things like that. So what I want to show you though is that this is just a class definition. These things are just variables of a given type. This one's a button, this one's a label. And actually, even though we're dragging and dropping these around the form, in the background, Visual Studio is actually writing the code for this for us. So if we come into our Solution Explorer, we can see we've got form1.cs and we've got form1.designer.cs. And this designer CS file, if we double click it, this is what's being designed for us. And you'll see here it even says Windows Form Designer generated code. If we just expand that region, we look in here, we can see button 1, we can see label 1, we can see button 1 is being drawn 12 across and 369 down. Is that right? Yep, 12 across, 369 down. If we just move it up into this corner, you can see now it's 628 across and 12 down. So essentially, it's good to get your head around the fact that updating things in here is still coding. You're still, it's still all C# code that's being generated. It's just, it does all of the heavy lifting for you. Back before we had a visual form designer, you'd have to write all of this code out yourself. And actually some people still do, because it gives you an incredibly precise amount of control over where everything is. And some people are just more comfortable just writing the code than using the visual designer. I'm not one of those people, or at least not on WinForms. I'm not. I might be tempted to do stuff like that on iPhone apps or Android apps, but in WinForms, I think the designer is very, very adequate, and there's no real reason you'd want to do all of that designer code yourself. You could. For the purposes of the next few videos, we won't be doing that. We'll just be using the design tool. So You might be asking how we link this up with some code that we would create. We obviously don't want to update the designer code, because every time we make changes in this window, this file will essentially be overwritten by Visual Studio. So one way we can get to the code behind file is to double click in the title bar, and it will open up this form1.cs, and you'll see here it's actually created a function for us called form1load. And that's because when a form is drawn on the screen, it will then fire, it will look on that object for a function called form1load, and then it will fire any code that it finds inside here, essentially. So you could think of this as the main function in our console app. This is kind of the first function that runs as your user interface comes up onto the screen. So one thing we might want to do in here is we might want to update this label. So you can when you drag the labels into your sort of visual designer here, you can actually click on them and you can look at the properties down here in the right. And you can see we've got a property called name. So we can change what that variable's name is, and we do that by just typing in here. So we might prefix it with something that makes it obvious. So that's a label, so we'll prefix it with LBL and we'll call it welcome message. Oh, not welcome K message. And then in our code behind file, we can reference that as a variable. So we can come in here and we can say LBL welcome message. You see it's got the autocomplete there. And if we just hover over that, you can see it's a field, because it was a field that was created by the Form1 designer. And if we just hover over again, and it's a label. So it's on the Form1 object. It's form1.lbl welcome message. And it's really good practice to give your UI elements that you've made in the designer prefixes that tell you what they are, because you've not got anywhere else on this screen where you could see what LBL welcome message might be. So then you'd have to hover over it and you'd say, oh, actually it's a label. So putting that LBL in front just lets you know exactly what that object is. So if we just double click that one and we look at what's available when we put a dot on the end, and there's all these different properties in here. And what you'll notice is that those are the exact same properties that we have in this list here. So we can update them in the designer if we want, or whilst the program's running, we can also update them via different code behind. So let's just go in there. The one we're looking for is text, and we'll set the text to, let's just say, hello, well. And if we go ahead and run that, you'll see that we've updated our user interface from the load method when the program runs. So that's all we're going to look at for today. I would encourage you to create your own Windows Forms project and just drag some of these elements out and just start having a look at them in your code behind file to see what sort of properties are on there, what sort of methods are on there, and see what sort of user interfaces you can get very easily with just a drag and drop interface. Hi, I hope you found that video useful. If you have any comments or feedback, then please leave me a comment below. I'm currently doing new videos every single day, so if you'd like to be notified about those, then hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.